Ladies and gentlemen, we just got our first peek at everything Narja can do, what her entire kit is about, every epiphany as well as her partner. And instead of just releasing a video with my snap decisions on telling you whether the character is good or not, I took the early morning to sort of decipher how I really felt about this character. What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. We are going and talking about my first impressions of Narja today. And let's start off with the most important part of her kit. No matter what it is about this character, she's really about these two buffs, veracity as well as predation. Now, veracity is going to be either an attack damage buff for anyone in your party, or it's going to be a way to slowly heal back up over time in a party as well. And it works as follows. When you hit with an attack card while you have a stack of veracity, you are going to get a 40% fixed heal amount, which is pretty low. However, if your health is 50% or higher, you're going to get a 30% damage amount increased by attack cards. And that's not just for Narja, that's for anyone that is using an attack card in your group while you have a stack of veracity. Now, when either of these proc, it's going to reduce the stack count by 1. You can have maximum of 30 stacks. Predation is going to be a secondary buff that is going to apply and also only be able to activate while you also have veracity stacks. And this is simply going to be an additional 80% damage amount dealt by attack cards. And this also is going to have a stacking mechanic, because when you use a stack of predation, it also is going to be reduced by 1. The easiest thing for you to do is support the channel by checking out the link in the description below. You're going to get a free legendary champion as well as up to $200 worth of free goodies. And don't forget, up to 3 awesome epics as you level up inside of Raid. And be sure to use the code Desert Queen to get access to your new free legendary champion in the form of Tahana Rock. As always, this helps the channel out so much, guys, so be sure to check that description down in the link below and join me in Raid today. Now, both those things sound very good in a vacuum, so let's start talking about her cards. Here's all of her basic cards as well as the base Epiphany versions. Now, she's going to be a defense-based scaling and damage dealer, although I personally don't think she's there to do a tremendous amount of damage. She does have a payoff card we're going to talk to here, which is going to be her legendary card Mealtime, but you can see that she also comes with 2 heals, and each of these heals is going to give you 2 stacks of veracity. All right, so this is very similar to like Nia getting elasticity, sort of a bonus effect tied to one of their base cards there. Hungers of Shackle is going to be a 1-cost attack card that does defense-based damage, and then it has the attunement effect that will give you 4 veracity. So that means when you draw this card, you will gain veracity for free. And I think it's going to be possibly one of the better ways to gain veracity stacks, but we'll touch more on that when we talk about all of her epiphanies, because I think she has maybe just a little bit of a weakness when it comes to if you really want to have her in your team or not, based on what she's doing with these veracity and damage bonus stacks. So the first epiphany base card we have here is Bottomless Hunger. The next 2 times veracity is activated, it's going to decrease the cost of a random card in your hand by 1 for the turn. Remember, this activates 2 times, so you can play Bottomless Hunger for free. You're going to play 2 cards that are attack cards. It's going to use the veracity bonus, and it's going to give you some AP reduction in some of the other cards in your hand, which is pretty decent there. Voluntary Control, the base version here, if your veracity is lower than 6 stacks, you will gain a 6 veracity. If it's 6 or more, you will gain 2 of the predation stack. We'll have to see how this one works and see if this translation works exactly how it says, because based on how it is right now, as long as you're below 6, this will give you 6. It doesn't say go to 6. So if you're at 0 and you cast this, you'll go to 6. If you're at 5 and you cast this, based on the wording, you'll go to 11. If it's worded incorrectly and it actually just makes you go to 6, then it will always just make you go to 6. Domain of Veracity here is going to be her yellow card. It does defense-based damage to all enemies, and it increases the tenacity damage of those enemies taken by 100% until their next Ravage. Final is going to be her payoff card Mealtime here. I know the text is very small, but it is a retain card, and it is a unique card. It has a base cost of 6, but every time you use a veracity stack, it's going to decrease the cost of this card by 1. In addition to that, it's going to increase the amount of healing that the card is going to do, and it also is going to do defense-based damage to all enemies and heal you. It also will give you 4 predation stacks, and it's one of the main ways to gain predation stacks inside of her base kit. Now, when we're looking at these cards at the face line value, there is one thing that I think you're going to have to really, and it's going to take a little bit of tweaking and people playing with her possibly, but the main weakness of her is that she's going to be this support type character that wants to do the veracity stacks, to do these predation stacks, to buff up the damage that your other characters are doing. But she's taking a slot in your party to do that, and a lot of the times you're also spending AP to do more damage when you also have other control characters who can draw cards, increase your damage, maybe not as much, but still have a damage increase effect. Also be AP efficient. Someone like Nia, someone like Ray, someone like Cassius can kind of already do all of these things by boosting your team's damage while also giving you some sort of card draw or card selection, and we don't see that in the base kit. So let's talk about some of the epiphanies. Now we have a couple of epiphanies for Shackles of Hunger. The first one here, Epiphany 1, is going to basically just increase the damage hits to 4 here, but the main one here is the attunement effect gets buffed up to giving you 6 veracity when you draw this card. And I think potentially this could work very well and maybe be one of her best epiphanies, as it's a way for you to gain veracity stacks with Narja in your party without having to spend any AP on her. So you can spend AP on other characters' cards in your team and just sort of let her give you veracity stacks. Think of comboing this with a character like Nia or like Cassius with Shuffle, where you can just kind of get veracity stacks for free without ever having to cast a card from Narja's kit that actually needs AP itself. The second one here is going to be a free version of Shackles of Hunger. The hits go down by 2, but it is going to cost 0. And then at the end of the turn, if veracity was acted 3 or more times in a previous turn, you can move this to your hand, and it still has an attunement effect, but it only is going to give you 1 stack of veracity if you choose this epiphany. All in all, I think this one's fine. It does return to your hand, you know, it returns, it gives you that stack of veracity right away. So there's some sort of cool intricacies in gameplay patterns you can use with this card. And I think both of these epiphanies kind of shore up that weakness that we just talked about. The third epiphany here is Shackles of Hunger, and it's sort of like I want to make by Narja a more sub DPS. It's going to increase the defense-based damage. It's going to add a hit for every 4 stacks of veracity owned up to a maximum of 3. You can't just make this hit like 50,000 times because remember, veracity stacks cap at 30. This one can only increase the amount of hits 3 extra times. The fourth and fifth epiphany are veracity consumers instead of builders here. The first one that we're going to go over, Epiphany 4, is a retain card. It costs 1 AP, and it's going to decrease veracity by a maximum of 5 stacks. And for every stack you take off, it's going to buff up the damage amount of the next card that you play by 40% per stacks. And if you do consume 5 veracity with this version of Shackles of Hunger, it will also give you 3 predation stacks, which is that nice 80% damage bonus there. So this one is a way to consume a bunch of veracity and then really buff up like the next card that you play, right? If you want to really buff up the next Haru Anchor, if you really want to buff up the next multi-hit card and you have a bunch of veracity and predation stacks, or if you really want to buff up that Kairon card that you're using, this is something that you can do a nice like one shot, I'm going to hit you really hard combo. The last one here is a defensive based option. It turns Shackles into a 0 cost card. It is a shield card. It will consume veracity stacks and then give you extra shields. It will cast itself extra times for each veracity that you consume up to a maximum of 3. So she's got some nice options just in the Shackles of Hunger where you can build her how you desire. I really think though a lot of the times we're going to be focusing on one of the first 2 epiphanies as a way to build up veracity stacks, because as we get into the other ones you'll see here, she doesn't really have a ton of ways to super efficiently build up her stacks outside of some of these Shackle Epiphanies. So next we have the Epiphanies for Bottomless Hunger. The first one, Epiphany 1, is 0 cost skill. It's going to give you 3 Veracity, which is nice, and the next 2 times Veracity is activated, it's going to decrease the cards randomly in your hand 2 times. It's a little bit better than the base version. It doesn't change too much outside of it giving you Veracity, and it's one of the few ways you're going to be able to generate some Veracity for free in her kit. The second version forgoes the whole Veracity mechanic in having to lose Veracity stacks to get that discount on cards. This one simply is just going to randomly discount 2 different cards for 1 turn. It's decent. It's okay. The third one here is an upgrade version of Bottomless Hunger. It's going to cost 1 AP. It's going to be unique, so you're not going to be able to duplicate this one. And every time Veracity is activated 3 times in a turn, it's going to decrease the cost of 1 random card in your hand by 1 time until you use it. And this can only proc 1 time per turn, which is pretty sad, because if this didn't have the 1 time per turn limit, I think that this could be potentially a really powerful combo epiphany, because you'd be able to do stuff like have attunement of the ones we talked about before in conjunction with someone like Nia, generate a bunch of Veracity stacks, and then have someone that can spend a lot of 0 cost attacks, someone like, I don't know, Serenial, to consume all of those Veracity stacks and just make everything cost 0 in your hand. But this has a once per turn limit, which means that I'm not the greatest fan of this, and I'd rather just use like Epiphany 1 that generates Veracity and still can give 2 different cards a discount as well. Epiphany 4 and 5. 4 here has Rechain, and it's going to once again increase defense-based damage. We're going to see this a lot on the last 4 and 5th Epiphanies for some of these cards, where it's kind of like Narja wants to enter the battle and stop being a strict support character. It wants to do a little bit of damage there instead. Honestly, a lot of the times controllers just want to buff the team, do card draw, do supportive things. And so I don't know if we're going to be using this Epiphany all that often, but it is there as an option for you. And then the final Epiphany for Bottomless Hunger does have lead. It will give you 7 Veracity. It costs 1 and is a skill card. And then each time Veracity is activated for 1 turn, plus 40% damage amount for the next mealtime, which was her big payoff card. So it's going to increase the damage amount for her payoff card. It does have leads, so you could possibly get this out of your hand for free, and it will give you 7 Veracity there. So for me, my opinion on this one, Epiphany 1 and Epiphany 5 seem to be the best ones here, because it's one of the few ways for us to gain as many Veracity stacks as possible to combo her in some of the better teams. We all know it by now. The best teams, the busted ones, are the ones who can spam 0 cost. Whether you're using Tressa or Serenial or Luke or Malin or whoever it is that you're out there, you're spamming multiple cards per turn. And so you're going to need multiple stacks of Veracity to really make Narja worth it in your party. Now we have Voluntary Control. The first Epiphany for this card, 1 cost skill. If your Veracity is fewer than 6 stacks, you will gain 9 Veracity, which leads me to believe that, yeah, if you're at 5 stacks of Veracity and you've cast this, you're going to be at 5, plus an additional 9, going up to 14, which is sick. The downside is that, well, you only still gain 3 Perdition if you're already over 6 stacks. So this is a nice card to like just gain a bunch of Veracity at the start of the match and maybe gain some Perdition over time if you want to. However, it does cost 1, and unless you're making a ton of AP, Narja is not being very AP efficient with this version of the Epiphany. You can kind of see, as we're going over this, a little bit of a problem or two that you have with Narja, where you're choosing to spend resources to buff up damage when you could maybe just use your AP to draw more cards and do more damage that way, use another control character. I'm not sure. The second Epiphany here, though, is free. It's 0 cost. If Mealtime's in the draw pile, which is your payoff card, it will move it to your hand. If it's in your graveyard, it will just give you 3 morale. So this is a nice way to get that Mealtime payoff card into your hand if you want to focus on that, or just give you some nice morale boost for the turn, and it does cost 0. The third Epiphany here for Voluntary Control. For 2 turns, each time the action count of a target is decreased, you gain 1 Veracity. I'm not sure why this is here, because this basically is just like a conditional gain 2 Veracity for 1 AP. So we're going to move on to the 4th one here. It's not even like of all enemies, it's like of the target. So if you have to target somebody, you're just getting 2. If this was like AoE, there's 4 enemies and it hits all of them, then it's a lot better. But it says target there, which leads me to believe that it's only going to activate twice per turn. So 4 veracity, 2 split over 2 turns each. No, I don't know. Moving on to the 4th one. Voluntary control upgrade is unique. It's going to give you 10 veracity when you cast it, which is awesome. And then in addition to that, you will select 1 attack card, and every time that card is moved to your hand, you will gain a perdition stack. Now, this one is something we're gonna have to see exactly how it says, because it doesn't say until the end of the turn, which leads me to believe that you can use this on a card that likes to return to your hand a lot, like the default, you know, base homing laser, not the ones with exhaust, but the ones that will just ravage return to hand over and over and over. You could use this, target that possibly, and then every time you ravage and bring that homing laser back to your hand, or, you know, something like that, any other character that has the ability to return cards to their hand over and over and over, it's going to give you 1 whole perdition stack, which is very hard to do if you've been following on. There's not very many ways to just gain that 80% damage buff inside of Narja's kit. So you can combine this with Serennial Laser. You can combine this with any character if you have Nia in your party, and just keep adagioing that card in and out of your deck over and over to gain perdition stacks. So I really like this one. The downside of this one is that, well, it's one of the few ways to gain a bunch of veracity. It's an upgrade card though, so it's an all-in-one deal, right? If you compare this Epiphany 4 that gains you 10 immediately and you can never cast it again, versus Voluntary Control Epiphany 1, where if you're down below 6 stacks, every time you cast it, you'll gain a 9. You can reuse that over the term of long battles, right? And be able to constantly, consistently gain veracity there. Whereas the 4th Epiphany is really about 1 big veracity, and then let's get the train rolling on the perdition stacks. And it's really like a very powerful but extremely niche Epiphany. But I think when we're trying to build like busted stuff, if Narja is going to be a part of it, you might be seeing the Epiphany 4 there. The Epiphany 5 Voluntary Control is also an upgrade card. It also is unique, and it's based around basic attack cards. So each time a basic attack card is dealing damage, doing a hit, it's going to gain you 1 stack of veracity, and it also is going to buff up the damage of basic attack cards as well. So maybe we'll be able to see Epiphany 5 do some cooler things in the future if we get more characters like Mei Lin with Move the Strikes to Hand, where you pop this version of Voluntary Control and you strike, move them back to hand, strike, move them back to hand, strike. All of those hits are going to generate and then like consume a stack of veracity, which is a big damage bonus there because you're going to have it for every single hit. Outside of all of that, I really like Epiphany 4, and I really like Epiphany 1 here. Once again, I kind of hate 3 and 2. I can kind of see 2 being pretty good there at the end of the day because it's just free, it costs 0, and it just sort of gets your payoff card in the form of Mealtime back into your hand. And now we have her yellow card, the Domain card, and honestly, I think that this card is here to just help everyone be temporary Serennial, okay? So the first version of this one, the 1st Epiphany, is going to still be a defense-based AoE. It's still gonna have the increased tenacity damage until the next Ravage, and then when targets Ravage, you will gain 3 veracity. So for AoE situations, if you want to gain a bunch of veracity, it's going to make it very easy to Ravage, you know, multiple targets, and each time you Ravage one of those targets, you will gain 3 stacks of veracity, which is pretty nice, and it's just a go-to like default Daniel basic way of being happy with this card in your deck. Against single target enemies, you're not really doing a whole lot. It's really focused around AoE, but so is every form of this card. So let's move into the next one here, Domain of Veracity Epiphany 2. Still doing defense-based damage to everybody, and then instead of doing all of the cool stuff where it makes it easier for you to Ravage and getting veracity stacks for 2 turns, you're gonna get a defense-based damage bonus increase to the targets that you hit. So if you want to use like a bunch of defense characters in some of these new game modes, right, where you're using maybe like Calliope and Magna in Narja and just do like a tank down thing, this is a 2-turn buff or debuff on those enemies where they will take more defense-based damage by all of your defense scalers. So your Magnas and your Calliope, whatever it is that you're doing, this is going to buff up an entire defense-based team. So this is going to be an epiphany that you either will avoid at all costs or will be the core part of the team you're putting together if you're doing a defense-based sort of damage dealing team, which is pretty cool. Epiphany 3, 180% defense-based damage, so it gets buffed up a little bit. And then this is going to give you, as a Narja player, a little bit easier ways to heal your teammates back up, because when hitting the targets for the next 5 times, you're going to get a 40% heal. So if you're finding yourself not really needing, extra healing, you'll probably avoid this one. It seems fine, but I think there's better things for you to spend epiphanies on. But at the end of the day, if you see this in a chaos run, want to turn your brain off, this will probably make it so, well, in an AoE situation, you're just going to be able to heal right through everything that you see there. Then we have a retain one with the 4th epiphany of Domain of Veracity here. Big defense-based damage on this, but it costs 3. It goes up to a 384% mod compared to like the 120% base that we can see from the other versions here. And on top of that, if you're granted both Veracity as well as Predation stacks, you're able to activate this and it will do another version of this big defense-based damage AoE as well. So this card is basically pretty much uncastable unless you can meet the conditions of having both Veracity as well as Predation there. And then the final one here is a nice little upgrade for Domain of Veracity. Turns into an upgrade for 1. It is unique. It will be a buff, and each time mealtime is used, you will heal 200%. And I kind of like this one as well. If you're not in AoE situations, you don't care about boosting the defense-based damage of your team, and you're just looking for like a way to, get a little bit of a benefit out of Narja in your party, but you don't really want to keep drawing her cards specifically. There are some pretty cool things you can do as far as making sure that you pick a lot of her upgrade cards for epiphanies and making her deck very small throughout the rest of the encounter. This one buffs her payoff card, makes her a better healer, and removes it basically from the deck for the rest of the encounter there. So I also don't hate this epiphany. So if we look at all of the epiphanies that we see here, there's one thing that's going to be a very glaring and obvious trend with Narja. She is going to be, well, one of the first control units outside of maybe Mika, who in their kit does not really offer very many ways to draw cards. If you look at characters like Ray, or you look at characters like Nia, Cassius, a lot of the incredibly powerful control characters have ways to both buff your damage, do damage themselves in some circumstances, be a little bit AP efficient while doing that, and give you card selection in some way, shape, or form. Narja does 2 things pretty well. She's got a lot of ways to heal your team. She's got a lot of ways to also buff the damage of your team up. The buffs that she does as far as damage goes, if you look at all of her epiphanies, are high, assuming that you can do the following, which is make sure that you always have Veracity as well as Predation stacks up for your damage dealers when they're doing your damage. If you look at the rest of her kit though, there's no card draw, so you have to rely on the other characters in your team, your setup, to make sure that, well, they can be a little bit self-sufficient. Someone's going to have to help you consistency-wise in 2 forms, both card draw as well as AP efficiency, so you can spend AP on your Narja cards to buff up the damage that your other characters are doing, which a lot of the times means that they need to spend AP on their cards too. And then you also need someone in your party to card draw, card filter, so you can kind of get Narja's cards to line up time-wise, putting the Veracity stacks on, putting the Predation stacks on at the same time or right before you do damage on a future turn with your damage dealers. So all in all, the benefits and downsides of Narja, she's going to have to overcome a couple of things. She's going to be a control character who can buff the damage of your team up probably higher than some of the other supports can in general. I know they're reworking Cassius. Nothing buffs your damage up more than stacking 10, 11, 12, 15, 20 morale stacks on Cassius. I get it. But there are other control characters, Rhythm Boost with Nia, just having Ray E6 in your team. Ray has damage bonus, both upgrades as well as skill cards to combo with as well. But those characters also have card draw, card selection. And a lot of the times, those characters are buffing up your team and doing the things that they want to do for low or even no cost on the AP side of the things, where Narja can do damage bonus, a little bit of side damage herself, a little bit of healing as well, but is really lacking at the end of the day card draw, card selection. So you're gonna have to try to piece those two things together if you're building a team with Narja in mind. I do think she's got some cool stuff that we talked about, right? Attunement effects, giving veracity for free, comparing and building that with another control character like Nia, right? With Adagio, where you can just cast Adagio a couple of times and, oh, I have 24 veracity stacks because I drew my 2 attunements, right? For Shackles of Hunger, put them back, Adagio'd again, drew them again, 24 veracity stacks. Good to go, ready to rock and roll, right? So there's a lot of cool stuff that you can do with this character. The question is gonna be, is she going to be necessary? And I think right now, for most players, I don't think she's going to be like giga necessary. I think she's going to have some really popping off potential because she's a control character. She can wear Nyx. You don't have to really go down the defense scaling, damage dealing route if you want to. And if you can piece together a deck outside of Chaos with some nice, well-built save data, and you can piece and solve that consistency AP card draw issue that she seems to have no answers for in her own kit, she can do some cool stuff there. In addition to that, though, we do have some of the slower gameplay styles coming to light with new content being released. They specifically talked about, you know, long-lasting dungeons where they want people to do slower strategies and counterattack and things of that nature. And defense scalers like Magna and Calliope sound like they're going to be really good there. And she has an entire build that you can build save data for that's based on making defense scaling damage dealers better. So if that's a playstyle that you enjoy, then Narja might be right up your alley for you because she's one of the only few characters that can kind of really play super well, specifically with that tank down strategy. So that's the interesting thing about her for me. Now, the other thing we need to touch on is going to be her partner. It's going to be Gaia. She's going to be a control partner. She looks really cool. Looks like she deserves to hang out with Narja, but what is it exactly that she's going to be doing? Now, if you're sick and tired, just like I am, of them releasing, well, partners that are basically usable for one character only, congratulations, welcome to the hate train. So this is going to be the passive for this controller. It's going to increase the defense-based damage of the equipped combatant by 8 to 16%. Well, there's not very many controllers that do defense-based damage. Well, Narja might be it, right? On top of that, it's going to further increase defense-based damage, and also it has a very specific effect when using a unique attack card of the assigned combatant that has an original cost of 6 plus 20 to 40% damage amount of all allies for the turn. So if you have this card, her mealtime payoff card is a unique attack card that has an original cost of 6, and it just makes her payoff card that much better because you can reduce it down to 0 very easily by consuming the veracity stacks, but it has a base original cost of 6, meaning that when you use mealtime, not only is it doing damage and healing your team, if you have this partner on, it also will give a team-wide damage buff as well. So then you'll have 3 ways to buff your damage with Narja. You'll have the predation stacks and the veracity stacks in the damage percent bonus from this as well. But also at the same time, you could just use Nyx and the ego skill here, Iceworm's Roar. I don't remember how much this one is quoted to be costed, but it does a small amount of damage, and then it will draw one of this unit's attack cards. And a lot of the times we have a couple of ways, right? We have the attunement attack card, so you can use this at hopefully a low ego skill cost, gain some veracity stacks there. You have the payoff card that you can then fetch with this ego skill, mealtime, and then use it immediately and do the damage bonus for everyone there. Or you can just simply put the battle pass card of Nyx on, which I think I would do. That sounds pretty strong to me. All in all, I think she looks cool. Aesthetically, she is right up my alley for a character, but I have so many good controllers leveled up for me personally right now. I basically have all of them maxed out except Orlia, and I'm actually working on maxing out Orlia next because the controller class is so, I don't know, busted. You let me know how you feel about Narja down below, if you intend on pulling for her, or if you're gonna join me in the, well, taking a break, save up for the next limited, get into season 2 mentality, and just let Narja pass you by. Until then, take care, guys. Check out the description down below, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.